Republicans are currently in hot water after attempting to quietly gut the Office of Congressional Ethics. Let's look at the person who Cory Booker really is. Booker voted against an affordable drug proposal from Senators Amy Klobuchar and Senator Bernie Sanders. So we thought he would get away with this, but he's not getting away with this, and basically, he's been publicly crucified, and I think that it's apparent that he knows his career is now over. President Obama has commuted the majority of Chelsea Manning's sentence. Progressive activism is actually really starting to get to congressional Republicans. Donald Trump has been the president now for just a week, and he's already proving that he is a complete disaster.
Keystone Pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Any regulations initiated unilaterally by President Obama that were in the process of being implemented have been frozen until Donald Trump's administration reviews them. He's prohibiting federal dollars from going to international organizations that provide abortions or information about abortion. President Trump has banned employees of the Environmental Protection Agency from giving social media updates and speaking with reporters.
Secretary, would you condemn the home demolitions by Benjamin Netanyahu? Secretary, do you also condemn the expansion of settlements?
The Young Turks and Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk have teamed up with veterans of Bernie Sanders' campaign to launch a new initiative to take over the Democratic Party once and for all. President Trump issued an executive order which bans Syrian refugees from entering the country. It led to nationwide protests at airports across the country as citizens from these countries were detained. He literally has the worst approval rating of any new president since we started keeping track of approval ratings 60 years ago.
Would bring back waterboarding and a hell of a lot worse.
I would do what I would do. I want to keep our country safe.
President Trump has made Ajit Pai the new chairman of the FCC. Now, Ajit Pai is a Republican that served on the FCC for 5 years, and I'm talking about this individual because he poses a severe threat to the internet as we know it, because Ajit Pai is someone who is vehemently against net neutrality.
If you can answer any of that, I'll sit down and shut up like Elizabeth Warren.
Do I deny climate change? No, the climate changes all the time. Yeah. People can't afford to get insurance.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
Donald Trump's team is reportedly conducting meetings in the dark because they aren't able to locate the correct light switches in the White House. His administration is attacking everyone that speaks out against Trump and calls it fake news because they believe it's, quote, wrong to attack the president. So he states, there's nobody better to tell me about Dodd-Frank than JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon. Donald Trump denounced a treaty that caps US and Russian deployment of nuclear warheads as a bad deal for the United States.
Rather than getting that new iPhone that they just love and they want to go spend hundreds of dollars on that, maybe they should invest it in their own health care.
So many of those people that are disenfranchised thought the primaries were rigged against them and their candidates. And the fact of the matter is, it's true.
It is my honor now to present the gavel, the next chair of the Democratic National Committee, to Mr. Tom Perez. Mr. Perez, congratulations.
The Republican Party is so shameless in their corruption, they literally made it legal for Verizon and Comcast and AT&T to sell your internet browsing history without your consent. So I wanted to do a video talking about the YouTube ad revenue crisis. Bernie Sanders will be going on a unity tour with DNC chairman Tom Perez. We passed 100,000 subscribers. It just seems like they've thrown this whole notion of resistance out the window ever since Donald Trump decided to illegally and unconstitutionally bomb Syria. House Republicans voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act and replace it with the American Health Care Act, which would allow insurance companies to discriminate against people with pre-existing conditions, and it also guts Medicaid, and it ensures that the wealthy get a huge tax break. We speculated as to whether or not Donald Trump's abrupt decision to fire FBI Director James Comey had anything to do with him possibly trying to obstruct justice. And now that we have the Comey memo, it seems as though that's definitely the case.
Go fuck yourselves with a locally grown organic cucumber.
The Guardian's Ben Jacobs tweeted out, Greg Gianforte just body slammed me and broke my glasses. The California Senate just voted to pass a single-payer Medicare for All bill. One individual in California unilaterally decided to kill their single-payer bill. Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon decided to shelve the proposal.
The United States will withdraw
from the Paris Climate Accord.
I do not support a livable wage.
Now, as you all know, July 12th is the internet-wide day of action to protest the FCC's decision to roll back net neutrality regulations. Democrats 2018. I mean, have you seen the other guys? I literally thought that this was satirical.
But I want you to tell the American people why you think it is a good idea to give $3 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% at a time when the rich are becoming much richer, while at the same time you're going to throw 17 million children in this country off of health insurance because of the unconscionable cuts that you are making to Medicaid.
Some of the largest companies on the internet, such as Amazon, Reddit, Netflix, Pornhub, among others, they all came together to send a message to the FCC. Leave net neutrality in place, leave the internet alone, we don't want you messing with the current net neutrality regulations. Protesters from the Protect Our Internet campaign went around Pye's neighborhood in Arlington, Virginia, and distributed door hangers at nearby homes, prompting people to be aware of their neighbors' efforts to limit internet freedom. The Democratic Party's donors have already coalesced around Kamala Harris, and they want her to be the Democratic Party's presidential nominee in 2020. President Donald Trump has offered a simple explanation for his wealthy cabinet choices. Rich people know how to manage money better than poor people do. We have another instance when a so-called family values Republican was outed as a gigantic hypocrite. Medicare for All got an unlikely ally recently. That individual is Kamala Harris. In moving up California's primary, this gives a huge advantage to candidates from California, specifically Kamala Harris, who currently is the establishment's favorite pick for 2020. Since early 2015, there's been allegations against Jane Sanders that during her tenure as the president of Burlington College in Vermont, she committed bank fraud by supplying a bank with misleading information on a loan application. And we know what his intentions are. He's trying to cripple Bernie Sanders ahead of the 2020 election. I've said it once, I'll say it again. This is a political witch hunt. North Korea conducted 2 tests of intercontinental ballistic missiles, and in response to these new sanctions, Kim Jong-un threatened to retaliate against the United States.
They will be met with fire and fury.
The deadliest terror attack to ever occur in the country of Somalia. We had the worst mass shooting in the history of our country. One of my viewers named Anissa submitted 2 comments to the FCC. The first one was submitted on May 13th, and she strongly encouraged the FCC to support net neutrality. But yet, on May 11th, Anissa realized that a phony comment was submitted on her behalf using a fake address, and this comment is against net neutrality. Nearly 13 million, more than ever before, and most of them tell Ajit Pai to leave the internet alone. He lost by nearly 4 points.
Jews will not replace us!
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right?
So when you put aside the fact that he is under investigation by the FBI for numerous reasons, he also is losing support. Ted Cruz decided to like a specific tweet on Twitter that some of us might consider hardcore pornography. I wanted to take a moment to reflect on Hurricane Harvey. He could have been housing a lot of people who lost their homes due to all the flooding that Hurricane Harvey caused, but he basically offered to just pray for them instead. He may actually be preparing to invade or bomb North Korea.
Would it be nice not to do that? The answer is yes. Will that happen? Who knows?
All 40 state parks are closed.
Governor Chris Christie, who had Island Beach State Park all to himself this holiday weekend.
The alleged shooter at the Republican baseball practice this morning is someone who apparently volunteered on my presidential campaign.
In spite of Bernie Sanders' condemnation of the violence, in spite of my repeated condemnation of the violence, and in spite of the fact that 99.9% of Bernie Sanders supporters are tree-hugging hippie pacifists, myself included, we were still blamed for this nonetheless because the shooter was a Bernie Sanders volunteer at one point in time. We learned that there will be no justice for Philando Castile when we found out that his murderer, Officer Yanez, was acquitted on manslaughter charges. One of the yes men posed as a DNC representative that was responding to criticism about the Democratic Party's recently announced Better Deal platform. We actually did find someone to primary Ruben Kihuen, and that individual is the very mother, Amy Vilela, who we looked in the face and said no to. They're going to presumably vote to kill net neutrality when the least amount of people will be paying attention. Fucking up the holidays for everyone. Thank you, Ajit Pai. I reported that Donald Trump was contemplating whether or not he would be ending an Obama-era program known as DACA. And early this week, unfortunately, we got confirmation that he would, in fact, be phasing out the program. We need to make Dreamers and these Haitians citizens. The Republican Party's Obamacare repeal and replacement bill is back yet again for what is now probably the 100th time this year, I think. Months of post-election malaise hamstrung the Democratic National Committee's fundraising over the first 6 months of 2017. President Donald Trump recently announced that since he's unable to get it done through Congress, he would be unilaterally dismantling the Affordable Care Act via executive order. Bernie Sanders finally unveiled his highly anticipated Medicare for All bill, and it actually immediately received quite a bit of support among Senate Democrats. Actually, 16 co-sponsors to be exact. There's a bill in Congress, HR 676. This would expand Medicare to everyone. Would you co-sponsor that if you were elected and support a single-payer healthcare system?
Yes, I probably would have sponsored it.
Absolutely.
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 I don't think I'll be able to get there quick enough to co-sponsor. I mean, I'll ask if I can fax it over, maybe.
Fellow Americans in Puerto Rico are currently facing mass destruction and devastation after Hurricane Maria almost completely wiped out their electrical grid, leaving most of Puerto Rico's 3.4 million residents with no electricity. Donna Brazil, former DNC interim chair, she basically gave us an inside account as to how the DNC and Hillary Clinton rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders. We had an announcement from the FCC which stated their intent to fully repeal Title II net neutrality regulations. And this will most likely be voted on December 14th, conspicuously during the holiday season, when you'll be spending time with your family. But he looks like a real-life version of Eric Cartman from South Park. Does he not? Exactly. And he acts like him too.
It's the largest tax decrease in the history of our country by far.
Roy Moore lost. I am completely surprised. The FCC has just voted in a 3-2 vote to repeal Title II net neutrality protections.
With that, we will call the vote. Commissioner Clyburn.
I dissent.
Commissioner O'Reilly.
Aye.
Commissioner Carr.
Aye.
Commissioner Rosenworcel.
I dissent.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges granted as requested. Thanks to the staff for your terrific work on this item.
But even though we lost the battle, the war isn't over, because now one of two things will most likely happen. Either this will be challenged in the courts, or Congress will step up and get involved to protect net neutrality. Now, one congressman did just that.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.